She grabbed his hand in front of 200 people, and the entire room stopped breathing. Maya Brooks, CEO of a $500 million empire, stood at the top of that marble staircase with her jaw tight and her eyes daring anyone to say a word. Beside her, a white man in a wrinkled button-down work boots, still scuffed with yesterday's grease, holding a little girl's drawing folded in his shirt pocket like it was more valuable than anything in that room. Her mother dropped her champagne glass. Her brother said, "Maya, what is this?" And Maya looked straight at Ethan Carter, a man she had spoken 40 words to in her entire life, and said, "Everyone, this is my boyfriend." But here's what nobody in that room knew yet. Neither did he. Ma'am, if you're watching this from Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, or anywhere across America tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this one goes places nobody saw coming. The morning it all started. Ethan Carter was on his knees in a parking garage on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, trying to stop a water pipe from turning a BMW's front tire into a swimming pool. Merde. It was 6:43 in the morning. He had been up since 5. His daughter Lily had a nightmare at 2 a.m., and by the time he got her back to sleep, there was no point closing his eyes again. So he made her lunch peanut butter apple slices, a small note that said, "You are the bravest kid I know." Packed her bag, dropped her at school early with Mrs. Patterson, who never complained about early drop-offs, and drove straight to the garage on Jefferson, where 3 different pipes had decided to fail on the same Tuesday. He liked the quiet of early morning work. Nobody talking at him, nobody measuring him, just the problem in front of him and the tools in his hand. Carter. His supervisor, Dave's voice bounced off the concrete. "Soon as you're done there, I need you on the 4th floor. Elevator panel's throwing a code again." "Copy," Ethan said without looking up. Dave paused. Ethan could feel him standing there. "You eat anything today?" "I'm fine, Dave." "That's not what I asked." Ethan finally looked up. Dave was a big man, mid-50s, with a gray beard and the kind of permanent squint that came from decades of fluorescent lighting. He held out a wrapped sandwich from the gas station down the street. Ethan stared at it for a second. "Turkey and Swiss," Dave said. "Don't make it weird." Ethan took it. "Thanks." "Don't thank me. Just fix the elevator before 9 o'clock. We got a tenant in 408 who'll file a formal complaint if she has to use the stairs." He walked off. Ethan unwrapped the sandwich with one greasy hand and ate half of it in 2 bites, crouched on the concrete beside a busted pipe, watching the city come alive through the garage's open side wall. Meh. This was his life. 40 hours a week sometimes. 50. A modest apartment in Westland with a leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix but never quite reached the top of his own list. Child support not received because Lily's mother had been gone for 3 years. Not dead, just gone, and the courts moved slow, and his lawyer was a guy who worked out of a shared office space and charged him $200 every time he answered the phone. He didn't complain. Complaining felt like wasted air. What he did instead was show up. Every single day. For Lily, for Dave, for the building's 4th floor elevator that no one else could figure out. He never expected to be inside the Meridian Hotel at all. But that afternoon, Dave sent him over with a replacement part for a HVAC unit in the ballroom level. Some charity luncheon had overheated the room, and 3 guests had already started fanning themselves with their programs. Ethan wasn't dressed for it. He had his gray work uniform, his steel toes, and a toolbox that had seen better years. The Meridian was not the kind of hotel where people like Ethan Carter walked through the front door. He went around the side the way he always did and found the service entrance. A young woman at the desk barely looked at him. "Maintenance for the ballroom, HVAC," he said. "3rd corridor, turn left, ask for Lewis." He found Lewis, fixed the unit in 20 minutes, started walking back out. That's when he heard it. A woman's voice, low, controlled, but with something underneath it that sounded like a held breath before a scream. "I told you, I am not signing anything today. Get your hand off that door. Ethan stopped at the corner of the hallway. A man he didn't recognize, expensive suit phone in one hand, the other pressed flat against a side exit door, was blocking the path of a woman who stood very still in a way that told Ethan she was deciding something. She was tall, black, dressed in a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than his monthly rent, with a phone clutched at her side and eyes that were doing the opposite of panicking. They were calculating. The man, older, red-faced, with the particular confidence of someone who had never been told no in a room where it mattered, leaned in close. "Maya, you don't want to make a scene." "I'm not making anything," she said. "You are. Move." "We had an agreement. We had a conversation. Those aren't the same thing, Richard. Now move away from this door before I call hotel security and explain to them why a VP of acquisitions is physically blocking a CEO in a service corridor." Richard didn't move. Ethan watched him not move, and he felt something in his chest shift, not heroic, not dramatic, just simple. The way it felt when a problem presented itself clearly, and the solution was obvious, if clearly, and the solution was obvious, even when it was inconvenient. He walked forward. "Excuse me," he said, calm as water. "I need to get through this exit with my equipment. Sir, I need you to step aside." Both of them turned to look at him. Richard's expression went from surprise to disdain in about half a second. He looked at Ethan's uniform, at the toolbox, at the grease still on his left knuckle. "This doesn't concern you," Richard said. "No," Ethan agreed. "But that door does. I've got a cart coming through in about 2 minutes, and hotel policy requires this exit clear." He looked at Richard without blinking. "You're welcome to continue your conversation down the hall. There's a seating area just past the elevators." Richard stared at him. Ethan stared back. The thing about Ethan Carter was that he had never learned to look away from a problem. It wasn't bravery exactly. It was more like stubbornness, dressed up as patience. Richard looked at the woman Maya as if expecting her to explain who this maintenance worker thought he was. She didn't explain anything. She stepped forward, past Richard, past Ethan, pushed the door open herself, and walked through it. Then she paused and looked back, at Ethan. Not with warmth, not even with particular gratitude. It was the look of someone cataloging information. "Thank you," she said. Flat, professional, final. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. She walked out. The door swung closed behind her. Richard muttered something Ethan chose not to hear, straightened his jacket, and went back the way he came. Ethan stood in the corridor for a moment, picked up his toolbox, walked out the other way. He thought about Lily's soccer practice at 6, whether he'd make it back in time, whether he'd remembered to charge her tablet. He didn't think about Maya Brooks at all. He found out who she was 3 days later when Dave pulled him aside in the break room and slid a newspaper across the table like he was passing a state secret. Brooks Capital under scrutiny. CEO faces board pressure over acquisition deal. The photo was her. Same jaw, same eyes, same quality of stillness. "That's Maya Brooks," Dave said. "Worth about $600 million, maybe more. Her family built half the office parks on the north side." Ethan looked at the photo for a moment. "Why are you showing me this?" Dave shrugged. "My cousin works security at the Meridian. Said a maintenance guy got between her and some executive on Tuesday. Figured that was you." "It wasn't a big deal. She apparently disagreed," Dave said. "Called the hotel manager, asked who the maintenance worker was." Ethan put the paper down. And nothing. They gave her the company name. She asked if there was a direct number. Manager said he'd pass along anything she wanted to leave. Dave paused. She left a thank you. No name, no number, just a thank you. Ethan nodded. "That's it," Dave said. "That's it," Ethan said, and went back to his coffee. He was wrong about that being it. 4 days later, he was outside his apartment building when a black car, not a stretch, not a show, Just a very clean, very expensive sedan pulled to the curb. A woman in a dark coat got out first, young with an earpiece and a tablet. She looked at her screen. Ethan Carter. He had a bag of groceries in each hand, and Lily holding onto the belt loop of his jeans, the way she'd done since she was 4. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Ms. Brooks would like a word." Lily looked up at him. "Who's Ms. Brooks?" He didn't answer her yet. He looked at the car, at the tinted window that showed him nothing. "She could have left a number," he said. The woman with the tablet almost smiled. "Ms. Brooks doesn't typically leave numbers." "Then Ms. Brooks," he said not unkindly, "can roll down the window." A pause. The window came down. Maya Brooks looked exactly like she had in the hotel corridor. Put together. Measuring. The faintest line between her brows that might have been irritation or might have been something more difficult to name. She looked at Lily. Something crossed her face and left before he could read it. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said. "You already did," Ethan said, "through the hotel manager." That was perfunctory. It was fine. She held his gaze. Most people in his experience found that uncomfortable coming from him, a big, broad-shouldered white man, with a quiet that other people often mistook for either hostility or stupidity. Maya Brooks didn't flinch. "I'd like to offer you something," she said. "A referral to building management for commercial contracts, the kind of work that pays 3 times your current rate." Ethan was quiet for the moment. He looked down at Lily, who was looking up at the woman in the car with the open curiosity of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned to pretend. "Why?" he asked. "Because you didn't have to step in," Maya said. "And you did. That doesn't require payment." "Everything requires something," she said. And it wasn't cynical exactly, it was just how she saw the world. He could hear it. "I appreciate it," Ethan said. "I'm going to pass." She blinked, just once, like a camera shutter. "You're passing?" "Yes, ma'am." "On tripling your income." "On owing something I didn't earn," he said simply. "That's a different kind of cost." She stared at him. He didn't move. Lily was now openly examining the car's rims. Finally, Maya said, "You're either very principled or very foolish." "Probably both," Ethan said. "Have a good evening, Ms. Brooks." He shifted the grocery bags, gently steered Lily away from the car's wheel well, where she'd crouched to look closer, and went inside. He didn't expect to see her again. He was wrong about that, too. The call came from a number he didn't recognize at 7:50 on a Thursday morning while he was combing Lily's hair, a negotiation he lost every single day, but engaged in faithfully and listening to the radio. "Mr. Carter." It was the woman with the tablet. He recognized her cadence. "Ms. Brooks is requesting your presence this Saturday. It's a family gathering at the Brooks estate." Ethan paused with the comb in midair. Lily said, "Ow." "Sorry, baby." He moved into the kitchen. "I'm going to need you to explain what that means." "Ms. Brooks would like you to attend as her partner." The word landed like a dropped wrench. "Her partner," he repeated. "Her companion for the evening." "I'm a maintenance worker," he said. "Ms. Brooks is aware. I don't own a suit that fits." Ms. Brooks anticipated that. "There will be something at this address by tomorrow morning." A pause. "There's no romantic expectation attached to the request. She'll explain further if you agree." Yay. He looked around the kitchen. The mismatched chairs. The drawing Lily had taped to the refrigerator of the two of them standing in front of what she called our tiny house, with the sun enormous and yellow above it. The chipped mug that said, "World's Okayest Dad," that she'd picked out herself at a church rummage sale. "Why me?" he asked, not deflecting, genuinely asking. The woman on the other end paused just long enough for him to understand the question had been anticipated, but the answer wasn't hers to give. Ms. Brooks will explain Saturday. What about my daughter? There's a children's program at the estate, supervised, well-staffed. He almost laughed. Well-staffed, like Lily was a logistics problem. I'll think about it, he said. Ms. Brooks will need an answer by noon. Then she'll have one by noon. He hung up, looked at Lily, who had appeared in the doorway holding her own comb with the patience of someone who had long accepted that adults were confusing. Who was that? She asked. Someone who wants a favor. Are you going to do it? He looked at her, at the drawing on the refrigerator. I don't know yet, he said honestly. She considered this. Dad, is it dangerous? No. Is it far? No. Will I come? Apparently. She tilted her head. Then I think you should do it. He took the comb back from her gently and started on her hair again. You know, he said, you're pretty wise for someone who argues with me about vegetables every single night. Broccoli is a bad vegetable, she said firmly. That's not arguing, that's facts. He said yes at 11:58. He told himself it was logical. The exposure, if Maya Brooks was genuine, could change things for him and Lily in ways that no amount of overtime would. He told himself it was temporary one evening, a favor clean slate. He told himself he could handle a room full of wealthy people looking at him like he was furniture. He had been looked at like furniture his entire adult life. He was used to it. What he was not used to, what he did not fully understand until he was standing at the top of that marble staircase on Saturday evening, with Maya's hand resting on his arm, with the same warmth she might extend to a business ledger, was what it would feel like when she said the words. The great room below them was full. 100 faces, maybe more. Chandelier light. The kind of silence that comes not from quiet, but from collective held breath. Maya looked down at them, at her family, at people who had known her for 30 years, and then she said it. Everyone! Her voice was even, flawless. The voice of a woman who had addressed boardrooms and congressional meetings and never once trembled. I'd like you to meet Ethan Carter, my boyfriend. Name. The room did not erupt. It fractured, in pieces. He saw a woman older, elegant unmistakably, Maya's mother, go rigid where she stood. A man across the room, thick-necked and expensive-looking, put down his glass with a deliberateness that was louder than any word. Two young women near the fireplace grabbed each other's arms. And Ethan Carter stood there in a suit that fit him perfectly, and had been left at his door without a note, with a maintenance worker's hands and a second-grade teacher's warmth in his face, and understood in the very clean, very quiet way that problems presented themselves to him, that he had just walked into something much larger than one evening. He looked at Maya. She was already looking at the room, not at him, the way a general looks at a field. And somewhere in the house, in a room with other children, and a woman who was reportedly well-staffed, his daughter Lily was probably drawing something, humming quietly to herself, completely unaware that her father had just stepped into a life that neither of them had seen coming. He exhaled once, slow. And he stood still. Because that was what Ethan Carter did. He stood still in the middle of things and let the world say what it was going to say. And then he dealt with what came next. What came next would surprise everyone in that room, including Maya Brooks. The room didn't explode all at once. It came apart slowly, the way ice cracks before it breaks one sharp sound, then another, then the whole thing giving way beneath its own weight. Ethan felt it before he heard it, a shift in the air. The way a crowd of people who have been holding their breath all decide at the same moment to let it go. Maya's mother moved first. She didn't cross the room. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned to the woman standing beside her, a sister, a friend, someone close enough to receive the full weight of what she was feeling, and said at a volume that was not meant to carry but did anyway, "What on earth has she done?" It wasn't a question. Ethan heard it, He was certain Maya heard it. She gave no sign. A man near the far end of the room, the one who had set his glass down with that deliberate quiet, started walking toward the staircase. He was broad, well-dressed, with the particular confidence of someone accustomed to being the loudest voice in any room without ever needing to shout. Maya's uncle Ethan would learn later. Gerald Brooks, the kind of man who had opinions about everything and had spent 60 years being told those opinions were valuable. Maya. Gerald stopped at the base of the staircase and looked up. He didn't look at Ethan at all, which was its own kind of statement. A word. Later, Gerald, Maya said pleasantly. Now, Maya. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. I said later. Gerald's jaw tightened. He looked at Ethan, then a long, slow look, the kind that was meant to diminish. It traveled from Ethan's face to his collar to his hands, and back up again, taking inventory, finding the total unsatisfactory. Who is he? Gerald asked, and the question was directed at Maya, but was really directed at the room, a performance, not a conversation. I just told you, Maya said. Ethan Carter, my boyfriend. Where did you meet him? Gerald. I'm asking a simple question, Maya. Where did you meet this man? There was a pause that lasted about 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, Ethan became aware of every face in the room oriented toward him. He kept his expression neutral, not blank neutral. There was a difference. Blank was absence. Neutral was a choice. He helped me, Maya said, when I needed it, which is more than I can say for most of the people in this room tonight. That landed. He could feel it land. Gerald's face went through several things quickly. Maya descended 3 steps, her hand still resting lightly on Ethan's arm, and addressed the room with the ease of someone who had chaired 1,000 difficult meetings. I'd like everyone to enjoy the evening. We'll eat at 8. She steered Ethan forward, and that was that, or it was supposed to be. What actually happened was that the room split around them like water around stone, and the murmuring began. Ethan had been in rooms where people talked about him. You didn't grow up the way he grew up, work the jobs he worked, and walk through the world in a body that read as one thing. Before you ever opened your mouth without learning what it sounded like when people decided they already knew everything about you. He recognized it immediately, the lowered voices that weren't quite low enough, the eye contact that broke just a half-second too late. A woman in a green dress said to the man beside her without particular effort to conceal it. She's making a point. That's all this is. She's making a point, and this poor man has no idea. Ethan thought actually that he had some idea. He just hadn't decided yet what to do with it. Maya guided him to a corner of the room, not hiding positioning, and released his arm with the efficiency of someone completing a task. She picked up a glass from a passing tray, turned slightly away from him, and said quietly, "You're doing fine." He looked at her profile. "You say that like you're surprised." "I say it like it's useful." "Do you want to tell me what exactly I'm doing? Because I have some guesses, but I'd rather hear the real version." She turned to face him then, and for just a moment, less than a second, something moved behind her eyes that wasn't calculation. He couldn't name it before it was gone. "My family has been pressuring me to hand over partial board control to Gerald," she said. Her voice was barely above murmur. "He's been positioning for 2 years. If I arrive at this gathering single, he uses it as evidence that I'm unstable, emotionally unmoored, that I need, in his words, a steadying influence, meaning him." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "And arriving with me solves that. Arriving with anyone would help. Arriving with you." She paused. "Complicates it, makes it harder for him to reduce this to a simple narrative." "Because I'm not what he expected." "Because you're not what any of them expected." He nodded slowly. Not angry. Not yet. Working through it the way he worked through problems, methodically, honestly. "And what do you expect from me tonight? Stand beside me. Don't let them rattle you. Don't volunteer information about yourself unless asked, and when asked, she considered. Be exactly who you are. That's enough. He studied her face. You don't believe that. Excuse me. You said be exactly who you are, like you're giving instructions to a tool, he said, calm as ever. You don't actually know who I am, Ms. Brooks. You know what I did in a hotel corridor. That's not the same thing. Maya looked at him with an expression that was difficult to read and said nothing. Then Lily appeared. She came from a hallway to the left, flanked by a young woman in a blue shirt who was clearly the designated child wrangler, and she walked directly to Ethan with the focused trajectory of an 8-year-old who had located her anchor point and was homing in. Dad, she said, they have a piano. Do they? Can I play it? Did you ask? She looked back at the woman in blue, who smiled and nodded. Lily turned back to Ethan. She said yes, but I wanted to ask you. He crouched down to her level. What do you want to play? The one Grandma taught me. Then play it. She studied his face the way she always did when she was checking whether something was wrong. 8 years old and already fluent in the language of his silences. Are these people nice? She asked. He felt the question like a small hand pressing on a bruise. Some of them, he said honestly. She seemed to accept this. She looked at Maya directly the way children look at people before they learn to pretend otherwise, and said, Are you the one who sent the car? Maya looked momentarily caught off guard. Yes. It was very clean, Lily said. We have a car, but it has a sticker on the door that won't come off. Dad tried everything. Lily, Ethan said gently. It's just true, she said, then looked at Maya again with 8-year-old impartiality. You're pretty. Something happened in Maya's face that she didn't fully control. A softening quick and involuntary, like a door opening before she could stop it. Thank you, Maya said. Lily nodded satisfied and went back toward the piano room with her escort. Ethan stood. He looked at Maya, who was watching the empty hallway where Lily had disappeared. She's incredible, Maya said almost to herself. I know, he said. Maya turned back to the room. The moment closed. And Ethan understood with a clarity that surprised him that somewhere underneath all the architecture of this woman's control, something real existed. He just didn't know yet if she'd ever let it out. The dinner was worse than the arrival. When they seated him beside Maya at a table long enough to host a state dinner between a woman named Claudette Gerald's wife, Pearls, the fixed smile of someone performing contentment, and a younger man named Dominic, who was either a cousin or an attorney, and possibly both. Dominic introduced himself with a handshake that was slightly too firm, the kind of handshake that was actually a test. So, Dominic said, cutting his food with casual precision. What is it you do, Ethan? Building maintenance, Ethan said. Dominic nodded, slowly, with the particular care of someone managing their expression. Commercial or residential? Commercial mostly. Some residential. And how long have you been doing that? About 12 years. Ah. Dominic glanced at Maya. A quick glance, heavy with something. Maya, you never mentioned? I don't share everything at dinner. Dominic, Maya said lightly. No, I just meant... He laughed. It was the kind of laugh that wanted company and didn't get any. It's a perfectly respectable profession. The words landed in the air, and everyone at that end of the table heard what wasn't said inside them. Ethan picked up his fork. He wasn't hungry, but he was not going to give anyone the satisfaction of watching him tense. Claudette leaned forward slightly. Do you own the company or... I work for a company, Ethan said. Have for 12 years. Oh. A pause. And your daughter, she goes to school locally. Yes. Public school. Ethan looked at her. Yes. Claudette smiled warmly. Perfectly warmly. That's wonderful. The public schools have really come so far. Maya's hand under the table found the edge of the tablecloth, and she pressed down on it with 2 fingers quietly, like she was steadying something. Ethan said, "She's got a teacher who makes her feel like the smartest person in any room she walks into. That matters more than the building." A beat of silence. Then an older man down the table, one of the few people who hadn't looked at Ethan with either calculation or pity, said, "That's exactly right." His name was Charles. He was Maya's great-uncle, Ethan learned later, and he was 81 years old and had the manner of someone who had watched too many dinner parties become battlefields and had decided somewhere in his 70s to just say what was true. "My kids went to the best schools money could find." Charles continued, not looking up from his plate. "2 of them turned out selfish. The other turned out fine. The school had nothing to do with it." Claudette laughed, the kind of laugh you deploy when a room needs diffusing. Gerald said nothing. Maya picked up her wine glass. Ethan caught Charles's eye briefly. The older man gave the tiniest nod, not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. One honest person, identifying another. The evening stretched on. After dinner, the men collected in a study. Ethan assumed this was deliberate, though no one announced it as such. Gerald was there. Dominic. 2 or 3 others whose names he hadn't caught. They had whiskey and a shared ease that came from decades of being in the same rooms together. And Gerald waited until a conversation about property investments had run its natural course, then turned to Ethan with the measured patience of a man who planned his moves several steps out. "Ethan," he said, "I hope you understand. We're protective of our family." "That's natural," Ethan said. "Maya carries a great deal. The company, the family name, the responsibilities that come with both." He paused. "She sometimes makes decisions quickly, emotionally." "I wouldn't know," Ethan said. "She seems pretty deliberate to me." Gerald smiled, patient, practiced. "You've known her, what, a few weeks? Long enough to notice she doesn't do much by accident. A small silence, the kind that has weight. Be that as it may," Gerald said, "a relationship between 2 people from very different." He searched for the word. He chose it carefully. "Circumstances. That takes real compatibility, real foundation." He sipped his whiskey. "What does a man like you offer a woman like Maya, Ethan?" The room waited. Ethan held the question for a moment, not because he didn't know the answer, because he wanted to say it correctly. "I don't know what I offer her," he said. "That's between us, but I'll tell you what I bring to every room I walk into." He set down his own glass. "Honesty. I don't say things I don't mean, and I don't mean things I don't say. I show up when it's inconvenient. And I don't need anyone in this room to validate who I am, Mr. Brooks. Never have." No. He said it without heat, without performance. Just clean and direct, the way he fixed a pipe or resolved a problem, finding the truth of it and naming it plainly. Gerald stared at him. Dominic stared at him. Charles, who had apparently followed them into the study and stationed himself quietly near the bookshelf with his whiskey, let out a single quiet sound that might have been a laugh. Gerald recovered. He was good at recovering. "Well," he said, "that's admirable." "I wasn't going for admirable," Ethan said, "just accurate." He excused himself and went to check on Lily. She was in a side room off the main hall, cross-legged on the floor with 3 other children, and the woman in blue playing a card game that appeared to be half-invented and entirely her idea. She had her serious face on the one she wore when she was fully engaged, brow slightly furrowed, lower lip tucked under her teeth. Ethan leaned in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She looked up, saw him, and waved once with the back of her hand, the wave that meant, "I'm fine. You can stop hovering," and went back to her cards. He stayed in the doorway a little longer than necessary. He was still standing there when he heard Maya's voice behind him, soft, unguarded, without the careful assembly she wore in the great room. "She's teaching them a game," Maya said. "She teaches everyone games," he said. "She makes them up. Has rules only she fully understands, wins more often than she should." Maya came to stand beside him in the doorway, close enough that he could have said something quiet to her without anyone hearing. She looked at Lily, at the focused, unself-conscious joy on his daughter's face. "I was never like that," Maya said, almost to herself. "Like what?" "That free." A pause. "In a room full of people I didn't know, I would have stayed quiet, stayed small, waited to understand the rules before I played." He looked at her. "How old were you when you stopped staying small?" She thought about it, genuinely thought about it. 15, Cho, she said. "My father lost everything, and then got it back, and the lesson I took from it was that you can't afford to be small. Not for a second." He nodded, didn't fill the silence with anything, just let it be. She seemed almost startled by that, by someone who didn't immediately reach to fill the space. "You're not what I expected," she said, and this time it wasn't an assessment. It was something else, something without a strategy attached to it. "You keep saying that," he said. "It keeps being true." Che. Lily looked up again from her card game and found them both watching from the doorway. She looked at Maya, then at her father, then back at Maya with the frank evaluating gaze of a child. "You can come in," she said. "We need one more person." Ethan looked at Maya. Maya looked at the room. Then quietly, without any of the performance she had worn all evening, she said, "What are the rules?" Lily grinned. "I'll explain as we go." Janitor. And Maya Brooks, CEO, half-billion-dollar name architect of every entrance and exit, crossed the threshold of a children's card game in her $500 blazer, sat on the floor, and let an 8-year-old explain the rules to her. Ethan watched from the doorway a moment longer. Something settled in his chest. Something very like the feeling he got when a complicated problem worked at long enough, and honestly enough, finally began to resolve itself. He went back to the study to finish his water, and left those two to their game. The morning after the dinner, Ethan's phone rang at 6:42. He was already up, already dressed, already standing at the kitchen counter, with coffee in one hand, and Lily's lunch bag open on the counter, deciding between the apple slices and the grapes. He looked at the number. Same one as before. The woman with the tablet. He answered. "Ms. Brooks would like to know if you're available this Thursday," she said. "Another event, a charity gala, black tie." Ethan put the apple slices in. "Same arrangement as Saturday." "Yes." He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. He thought about Gerald's face when he said, "I don't need anyone in this room to validate who I am." He thought about Maya sitting cross-legged on a floor in a $500 blazer learning card game rules from an 8-year-old. "Tell her yes," he said. "But I need to arrange care for Lily first." Of course, Ms. Brooks anticipated that. She's prepared to cover. "I'll handle it," he said. A pause. "Understood. Thursday, 7 o'clock. A car will come at 6:30. He hung up and looked at the apple slices in the bag, then added the grapes too. Lily could have both. What he didn't fully understand yet, what would become clear to him slowly over the next 3 weeks, was that he had just agreed to something that had no clean exit. Because the gala led to a board luncheon. The board luncheon led to a company anniversary dinner. The company anniversary dinner led to a press photograph that ran in the Columbus Business Journal with the caption, "Brooks Capital CEO Maya Brooks and companion." And the photograph led to Maya's phone ringing in ways that changed the temperature of every room she walked into. People were watching now, people with money, with opinions, and with stakes in how Maya Brooks conducted her personal life. The Thursday gala was harder than the estate dinner. The estate dinner had been family cutting, but contained. The gala was public. 500 people in a hotel ballroom, and at least 100 of them had seen the Business Journal photo or heard something from someone who had. Ethan felt the attention differently here. It wasn't the slow assessment of Gerald's crowd. It was faster, more speculative. People deciding a story about him before they reached him. A woman named Patricia. She introduced herself as a longtime Brooks Capital investor, which Ethan translated immediately as a person with financial reasons to have opinions approach them within the first 15 minutes, with a smile that was doing a great deal of work. "Maya, you look wonderful," Patricia said. Then she turned to Ethan with the particular brightness of someone preparing to be gracious. "And this must be Ethan Carter," he said, and shook her hand before she could finish the sentence with whatever she had prepared. Patricia laughed. "Yes, I saw the photo. Tell me about yourself, Ethan. What do you do?" "Building maintenance," he said. "Commercial." The smile held, barely. "How interesting." "It is actually," he said. He wasn't performing. He meant it. Most people don't think about what keeps a building functioning until something stops. Then it matters quite a lot. Patricia looked at Maya. Maya looked at her wine glass. "Well," Patricia said warmly, "it takes all kinds to make a city run." Ethan nodded. "It does." He let the silence sit. He was very good at letting silence sit. Patricia filled it with a pivot to Maya about a foundation event, and the moment passed, but he caught two other investors exchanging a look across the room that said everything Patricia hadn't said out loud. Maya said nothing throughout. Not a word in his direction, not a deflection, not a defense. She was doing what she always did, managing the room, the angles, the narrative. He was a piece in that management. He understood it. He had agreed to it. That didn't mean it settled easily. Later near the bar, he stood alone for 4 minutes while Maya was pulled into a conversation with a city councilman, and in those 4 minutes, 3 different people introduced themselves to him with the barely concealed curiosity of people approaching a zoo exhibit. A man named Troy asked him twice in different phrasings whether he'd gone to college. A woman whose name he didn't catch complimented his suit in a way that made it clear she was surprised he was wearing one. A younger man, early 30s media company, he said with the ease of someone accustomed to rooms like this, shook his hand, and then said with what he probably imagined was casual frankness, "So, how does that work?" "You and Maya." Ethan looked at him. "The same way it works for anyone." Sure. I just mean she's got a lot going on. Big world, big demands." "I'm aware of what she does," Ethan said. "Right, but..." The younger man smiled in the way people smile when they're about to say something they know is impolite, but have decided to say anyway. "Don't you ever feel like I don't know?" Out of your depth, Ethan considered the question with genuine fairness. "Do you feel out of your depth when your car breaks down?" The man blinked. "What?" "When your car breaks down," Ethan said calmly. "Do you feel out of your depth, or do you call someone who knows how to fix it?" The younger man stared at him, uncertain whether he'd been insulted. "I'm just saying," Ethan said without heat, "everybody's in their depth at something. The question is whether you're honest about what that is." He excused himself, retrieved a glass of water from the bar, and walked back toward Maya. She had watched the last 30 seconds of that exchange from across the room. He could tell by the way she looked at him when he returned. Not the calculation. Something else. "What did Marcus say to you?" she asked. "Marcus is the media guy." "Yes." "He asked if I felt out of my depth." Her jaw tightened, slightly, almost invisible. "And you said..." "Something about cars," Ethan said. For a moment, just a moment, she almost smiled. It didn't complete itself, but it got close. Closer than anything he'd seen from her in a room like this. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment ended, and she was back to what she was built to be. The second week brought something harder than social humiliation. It came in the form of a woman named Deborah who called Ethan's cell phone on a Wednesday afternoon while he was replacing a circuit breaker on the 3rd floor of a commercial property on 5th. He didn't recognize the number. He answered because he always answered Lily's school Dave contractors you never knew. "Mr. Carter," the woman said, "my name is Deborah Walsh. I'm a reporter with the Columbus Examiner. I'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Maya Brooks." Ethan didn't say anything for a second. "Mr. Carter, how did you get this number?" "We have resources." "That's not an answer." A pause. We spoke with a former colleague of yours, at your workplace. He thought about that, filed it away. I don't have anything to say, he said. We're running a piece regardless. It would be better for you to have your voice in it. Better for who? Silence. Thank you for calling, he said, and hung up. He called Maya's number. She picked up on the second ring, which surprised him. She usually let it go to her assistant. A reporter called me, he said. 3 seconds of quiet. Then, Deborah Walsh. Yes. She's been working a story about me for 6 weeks. This is escalation. Maya's voice was level but tight. What did you tell her? Nothing. Good. Don't speak to her again. I'll have my communications team. Maya. He used her first name for only the second time. She paused. Is there something I should know about? Something that's happening that explains why a reporter is calling a maintenance worker's cell phone to find leverage on you. A longer pause. There are people within my company, she said carefully, who would benefit from my position becoming unstable. How unstable are we talking? Nothing I can't manage. That also, he said quietly, is not an answer. And she was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, something in her voice had shifted. Not much, just enough to notice. There's a board meeting in 12 days, she said. Gerald has been gathering signatures. He needs 7 board members to call a vote of no confidence. He may have 5 already. Ethan leaned against the wall in the third-floor corridor circuit breaker, forgotten. And the reporter, he asked. Information is currency, she said. If someone can prove I fabricated a personal relationship for optics before a major board vote, it changes the narrative. It makes me look desperate, dishonest. He let that sit for a moment. But you did, he said. Fabricate it. For optics. The silence that followed was the loudest thing he'd heard from her. Yes, she said, and nothing else. He didn't judge her for the admission. He just needed to understand the shape of what he was standing in. What do you need from me? He asked. I need you to keep doing what you've been doing. Show up, be yourself, don't give the reporter anything. And after the board meeting... Another pause. After the board meeting, the arrangement concludes, as agreed. He nodded to himself in the empty corridor. All right. Ethan. It's fine, he said. I said I'd help. I meant it. He hung up, went back to the circuit breaker, fixed it in 8 minutes, drove to pick up Lily from school. She talked the entire way home about a project on the solar system, and the fact that she had decided Saturn was the best planet because of the rings, and also because the name sounded important. He listened to every word, asked which planet she'd live on if she had to choose. She considered this with great seriousness and said, Jupiter actually because it was the biggest and she liked having space. My way. He laughed, a real one from somewhere low in his chest, and for a little while, the circuit breaker and Deborah Walsh and Gerald Brooks and board votes dissolved into the ordinary warmth of his daughter deciding the merits of gas giants. That night, after Lily was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold and thought about what he was doing. Honestly, the way he always tried to think about things without flattery, without excuse. He had agreed to a transaction. He was holding up his end. So was Maya in her way. Nobody had lied to him. Nobody had made promises beyond what was said. And yet... He thought about the way Maya had looked in the doorway watching Lily play cards. He thought about the thing she'd said, I was never like that. That free, and the way she said it, not like a regret, but like an artifact. Like she'd found something she'd lost so long ago, she'd stopped believing it had ever existed. He didn't have feelings for Maya Brooks. He was clear about that with himself. What he had was something more complicated, a kind of recognition. The specific recognition of seeing a person buried under the person they'd been required to become. He knew something about that. He'd spent 12 years being the maintenance worker, functional, reliable, invisible as infrastructure. The man everyone called when something broke and nobody thought about when it worked. The difference was that he'd made peace with it. Maya hadn't. She'd just built walls high enough that you couldn't tell. He poured the cold coffee down the drain and went to bed. The story broke on a Friday morning, not the full story, a fragment. A blind item in a local gossip column that described a major female executive and her unlikely new relationship as possibly arranged. No names, but the detail density left little doubt. By noon, 4 people had texted Maya. By 3 o'clock, it had been picked up by 2 local news blogs. By 5, a national business outlet had run a 3-paragraph item with Maya's name and the word arrangement in the headline. Ethan found out through Dave, who had found it through his cousin, who had sent a screenshot with no caption. Dave dropped it on the break room table in front of Ethan without a word and waited. Ethan looked at the screen, read it, set it down. "You knew what you were getting into?" Dave asked. "I knew it was complicated," Ethan said. "This is past complicated, Ethan. This is your name next to a CEO in a business scandal. My name isn't in it." "Not yet." Ethan drank his water. "I appreciate you looking out." "I'm not looking out. I'm alarmed. There's a difference." Dave sat down across from him. "She's using you." "She told me what this was from the start. And that makes it okay." Ethan thought about it. "I'm not sure okay is the right category," he said. "I made a choice. I had information. Adults make choices." Dave stared at him. "You like her?" "I don't." "Not like that necessarily. But you respect her, which is almost worse because people who respect someone will take a lot more damage trying to protect them than people who are just in it for the payoff." Ethan was quiet. Dave pointed at the phone. "She needs to know about this if she doesn't already." "She knows. And she's handling it." "How?" Ethan picked up his coffee cup, looked at it. "I don't actually know," he admitted. He found out an hour later. Maya called him at 4:27. Her voice was different, still controlled, but the control was doing more work than usual, the way a structure sounds when it's bearing more weight than it was designed for and hasn't broken yet but is starting to articulate the strain. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Go ahead." "The board meeting is in 9 days. Gerald has 6 signatures. He needs 1 more." She stopped. "He approached Teresa Lang today. She's the swing vote. She's been with us for 11 years. She's principled, which means she can be moved by the right argument." "What argument is he making?" "That I am not a stable leader. That the relationship was fabricated. That my judgment cannot be trusted when I am willing to manufacture personal circumstances for professional advantage." A pause. "He's not wrong about the manufacturing. He's wrong about the judgment," Ethan said. "Ethan?" Her voice cracked on his name, just slightly, like a single fissure in glass. "I need you to come to the office Monday. I need you to be visible. I need Teresa to meet you and make her own determination. But I need to be honest with you about what that means. Tell me. If you come Monday, it becomes real in a way that's different from galas and dinners. You'll be at my office. My staff will see you. The people who are trying to take this company from me will see you. And if this falls apart, if Gerald wins that vote, your name will be attached to it. Not mine. Mine has lawyers and resources. Yours doesn't." He let the full weight of that sit. Then he said, "What time Monday?" She exhaled, long and slow. Something that in another person, a less assembled person, might have been called relief. 9 o'clock, she said. "I'll be there." Another pause. Longer this time. "Why?" she asked. And it wasn't strategy. It wasn't calculation. It was the question of a woman who had spent so long in rooms where everyone wanted something that she had genuinely lost the ability to recognize the absence of a price tag. Because someone's trying to take something from you that's yours, he said. And because I told you I'd help. And because... He stopped. Chose the next words with care. Because Lily would want me to. He heard her breath on the other end of the line. She's remarkable, Maya said softly. She is, he said. 9 o'clock Monday. I'll see you then. He hung up. Sat in the break room for a long moment. Then stood up, picked up his tools, and went back to work. Because whatever was coming on Monday today, there were still things that needed fixing. And Ethan Carter had never once in his life walked away from something that needed fixing just because it was hard. He wasn't about to start now. He wore the same suit from the gala, not because it was the only one he owned. Now Maya's team had sent 2 more after the Business Journal photo ran, but because it was the one he'd been himself in, the one he'd worn when he told Gerald Brooks he didn't need anyone in that room to validate who he was. It felt important to wear the same armor going into a different fight. He dropped Lily at school at 7:50, waited until she disappeared through the front doors, then drove to Brooks Capital on the north side. The building was 16 floors of glass and steel that reflected the morning sky back at itself. He had driven past it 100 times in his life, without once thinking about what happened inside it. He parked in the visitor lot, walked to the front desk, and said his name. The receptionist, young professional, carefully neutral, looked at her screen. Something shifted in her expression. Not much. Just a flicker of recognition that told him his name had been mentioned in this building recently, and not always kindly. Ms. Brooks is expecting you, she said. 42nd floor. I'll let her assistant know you're on your way. Cool. The elevator opened onto a floor that was already moving. Not physically, the people were mostly at their desks on phones in quiet conversations, but there was an undercurrent of tension that Ethan recognized immediately. He'd felt it in buildings before crisis. The particular quality of air in a place where people know something is wrong and don't know yet how wrong. Heads turned as he walked through. He didn't hurry. He didn't look around with the wide eyes of someone new to this world. He walked the way he always walked, measured aware like a man who understood the space he occupied and was comfortable in it. Maya's assistant, a woman in her 40s named Carol, who had the efficient warmth of someone who had survived many corporate storms, met him at the glass doors and said, "Mr. Carter, she's ready for you." Damn it. Maya was standing when he entered. Not at her desk at the window, which was the kind of floor-to-ceiling glass that made Columbus look like a planned city instead of an evolved one. She turned when he came in, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. She looked tired. Not visibly, she was too disciplined for that. But something behind her eyes had been working overtime, and it showed in the set of her jaw, in the way she stood like she was bracing for impact, even at rest. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She nodded, moved to her desk. Teresa Lang arrives at 10. She agreed to a meeting, which means she's not committed yet. Gerald has been in her ear for 2 weeks. She picked up a folder, set it down, picked it up again. He noticed that. She was not a person who picked things up twice. She's going to ask questions about us. She's going to be looking for seams. Then we don't have seams, he said. Maya looked at him. Ethan. She is extremely perceptive. 11 years on this board. She'll know the difference between... Maya. He said her name the way he said everything, quietly, directly, without decoration. I'm not going to perform anything for Teresa Lang. If she's as perceptive as you say, performance is exactly what she'll see through. He paused. What I can do is be honest. Honest about what? That this started as a transaction. Honest about what it is now, he said. And he let that sit because he meant it, and he hadn't fully meant to say it, and he needed a second to hear it himself. Maya was very still. What is it now? She asked. And the question was careful. The question of a woman stepping onto ice and checking the thickness before each step. He thought about this corridor at the estate, about her saying I was never that free. about the way she'd sat on the floor in a $500 blazer and let Lily explain impossible card game rules to her without once reaching for her phone. "I don't know exactly," he said honestly, "but it stopped being just a transaction about 2 weeks ago. And I think you know that." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she looked away, which told him more than anything she could have said. "Teresa at 10, she said. "Back to business." But her voice had changed by a quarter tone, something softer underneath it now, like a frequency she couldn't fully suppress. "My communications team wants you briefed on talking points." "No talking points," he said. She closed her eyes briefly, opened them. "Ethan, if I show up with talking points, she'll know. Let me talk like myself. That's what you said at the estate, be exactly who you are. You meant it as a strategy then. I'm telling you, it's the only thing that actually works." A long pause. Then something moved through her face. Reluctant, honest, the look of a person recognizing a truth they'd been avoiding. "All right," she said quietly. "No talking points." Teresa Lang was 63 small, with the kind of focused attention that made you feel like the only person in the room, even when she was looking at your shoes. She shook Maya's hand first, then Ethan's, and her grip was firm, and her eyes were immediate. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I've heard a great deal about you." "I expect so," he said. "May." She almost smiled. "Direct? Good." She sat. Maya sat. Ethan sat. Carol brought coffee and disappeared. "I want to be transparent with you both," Teresa said. "I'm here because Gerald Brooks made a compelling argument. I'm also here because I've worked with Maya for 11 years, and I don't make decisions based on one compelling argument." "That's why you've lasted 11 years, Maya said. "Flattery," Teresa said pleasantly. "Also noted." She turned to Ethan. "Tell me how you met." He told her. The truth. The hotel corridor. Richard's hand on the door, the way the situation was simple, and the solution was obvious. He told her about the car arriving outside his apartment building, about saying no to the business referral, about the phone call, and Lily's voice from the doorway saying, "Then I think you should do it." Teresa listened with the stillness of someone recording everything, and you understood from the beginning that this was, she chose her word carefully, unconventional. "I understood it was complicated," he said. "I've had complicated in my life before. I know the difference between complicated and dishonest." "And which is this?" "Complicated," he said. "What started as an arrangement between 2 adults who were honest with each other about what it was." He paused. "Doesn't stay an arrangement. Not if you're paying attention." Teresa looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Maya, then back at Ethan. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I keep hearing that," he said. This time Teresa did smile, fully, briefly, with real warmth. "I imagine you do." She folded her hands on the table. "Maya, I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Always," Maya said. "Did you fabricate this relationship to stabilize your position before the board vote?" The room was perfectly quiet. Maya looked at Teresa. Then she looked at Ethan. And something in that look, the fact that she looked at him at all, that she checked something with him before she answered, told Teresa everything before Maya opened her mouth. "Yes," Maya said. "That was the original intent." Teresa nodded slowly. "And now?" Teresa asked. Maya was quiet for a moment. "Now I'm not sure I have the right to describe what it is," she said, "because it became something I didn't engineer, and those are the only things in my life I've learned to trust." Teresa studied her. Then she stood, shook both their hands again. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "Both of you." She looked at Ethan one final time. "Your daughter's name is Lily." He blinked. "Yes. I heard she beat 3 adults at a card game she invented herself." The warmth was still there, She sounds like someone worth protecting." She left. The door closed behind her. Ethan and Maya sat in the silence of the room for a long moment. Then Maya said very quietly, "I don't know what she'll do." "Neither do I," he said. "But you told the truth. That's the only thing you can control." She turned to him with an expression that was the most open he had ever seen on her face, without the architecture, without the management, just the face underneath all of it, which was the face of a woman who was tired in a very old way and didn't know if she was allowed to set it down. "I'm not good at this," she said. "At what?" "At..." She gestured vaguely, which from Maya Brooks was the equivalent of a full confession. "Not knowing the outcome, not having the variables, sitting in a room after doing the honest thing and not knowing if honest was enough." "Nobody's good at that," he said. "They just practice it enough that they stop expecting a guarantee." She looked at him. "How do you do it every day? You show up, you fix things, you take care of Lily. You walk into rooms full of people who underestimate you, and you don't flinch. How?" He thought about it seriously. She deserved a serious answer. "I stopped needing them to see me right," he said finally. "A long time ago. When Lily's mother left, I spent about 6 months waiting for the world to notice that I was doing something hard. Nobody noticed. And eventually I realized that nobody noticing and something being hard are not related. The thing is still hard, you still do it. The doing is the point, not the recognition." Maya absorbed this the way she absorbed everything quietly, completely, with her full attention. Then her desk phone rang, and the day broke back open. It was Carol. Her voice was tight. "Ms. Brooks, there's a situation. Conference room B. You need to come now." The situation was this: a senior vice president named Paul Merton, 11-year employee, Maya's second in acquisitions. The man she had trusted with the structural details of every major deal in the last 4 years had been in a private meeting that morning with 2 members of Gerald's camp and a representative from a competing firm called Reston Group. Maya's head of security, a quiet man named Aldridge, who wore the permanent expression of someone who had stopped being surprised by human behavior, laid it out in 45 seconds flat. Paul had accessed proprietary acquisition files over the weekend. Files related to a pending deal that Brooks Capital had not yet made public. The kind of files that would be extremely valuable to a competitor who wanted to undercut Maya's next move before the board vote made everything unstable. Maya stood at the head of the conference table and did not move for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "Where is Paul now?" "His office," Aldridge said. "He doesn't know we know." "Get legal on the phone," she said. "Don't approach Paul. Don't let him know." She turned to her communications director. "Draft nothing. Send nothing. Until I say." She looked at Aldridge. "Can you confirm what he sent content recipient timestamp?" "Working on it. 90 minutes, maybe less." She nodded. "Then we wait." Ethan had been standing near the door. Not in the meeting, he wasn't part of this. But the door had been left open, and no one had told him to leave, and Carol had looked at him with the expression of someone glad there was another calm person in the building. When Maya came back out to the hallway, she looked at him with the focused clarity of someone in crisis, who has burned through every available option and arrived at an unexpected one. "I need a second opinion," she said. "Not legal, not communications, just..." She stopped. "Someone without a stake in the outcome." "All right," he said. "Paul has been with me 11 years. He's been loyal. He has a daughter in college. If I'm wrong, if Aldridge is wrong, I destroy a man who doesn't deserve it." She lowered her voice. "But if I'm right and I wait too long, the deal is gone and Gerald gets exactly the chaos he needs." Ethan thought about it. Not fast, not to appear decisive. He actually thought about it the way he thought about any system under pressure, tracing the load, finding where it was bearing most, asking what breaks first. "What does Paul know about the board situation?" he asked. "Everything. He's been in every strategic meeting." "And when did the leak happen?" "Weekend. Saturday night, after 2 a.m. "Who was at the estate dinner 2 weeks ago?" Maya went very still. Paul was there, as a +1, with Gerald's group. Ethan looked at her, didn't say it, let her get there herself. Her expression moved through several things. Disbelief, first, the kind that precedes confirmation of something you didn't want to know, then a terrible clarity, then something that was not quite anger, which was worse than anger. It was the look of a woman recalibrating an entire map of who she thought she could trust. He was in that room, she said. Saturday night. He heard everything Gerald said. He chose a side before the dinner was over, Ethan said. She pressed one hand flat against the wall, not dramatically, just steady the way a person steadies themselves when the ground moves. 90 minutes, she said, more to herself than to him. 90 minutes, he confirmed. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her face went through something fast and complex. She held it out to him. A text from Teresa Lang. 4 words. You have my vote. Ethan read it. Read it again. Looked up at Maya. She was looking at him with an expression he had no category for. It wasn't relief exactly. It was larger than relief, and quieter than joy. And somewhere in it was something that looked from where he was standing like the beginning of trust that had nothing to do with strategy. 4 words, he said. 4 words, she said. That, and then completely without warning, without calculation, without anything that resembled a managed decision, Maya Brooks crossed the 2 feet between them and held on to him. Not a lean, not a gesture. She held on with both hands, gripping the front of his jacket, like someone who had been standing in a strong current for a very long time and had finally found something that didn't move. He didn't make it into anything. He didn't perform warmth. He just stood still, the way he always stood still, and put one hand on her shoulder, and she stayed there for exactly long enough to let it be real. Then Carol appeared at the end of the hallway and said, "Aldridge has confirmation." Maya pulled back, straightened her jacket, looked at him once, a look that had no management in it at all, and then walked toward what came next. Ethan exhaled, stayed where he was for a moment. Thought about Lily at school right now, probably in the middle of her solar system project, probably telling someone with complete authority which planet was best and why. Thought about a year ago, 2 years ago, when this floor of this building had been as invisible to him as he was to the people inside it. Thought about the fact that an 11-year veteran who had just sold out a woman who trusted him for 11 years was about to find out what that decision cost him. And then Ethan Carter picked up his jacket from the chair where he'd draped it, straightened his collar, and walked down that hallway toward the conference room where everything was about to break open. Not because he had a stake in the outcome, because someone he'd come to respect was standing in the middle of it. And Ethan Carter had never once walked away from something that needed him present. Not once in his life. The confirmation came at 11:47. Aldridge walked into conference room B with a printed summary and set it on the table in front of Maya without a word. She read it standing up. Didn't sit. Didn't ask anyone to leave. Just read it the way she read everything, completely, without expression, processing faster than most people could follow. Paul Merton had transmitted 4 internal documents to a personal encrypted account at 2:17 on Saturday morning. The documents included preliminary term sheets for a pending acquisition that Brooks Capital had spent 8 months negotiating. The competing firm, Reston Group, had filed an intent to acquire the same target company at 9 a.m., Monday, 36 hours after Paul's transmission. The timing was not coincidental. Nothing about it was coincidental. Maya set the summary down, looked at Aldridge. "Is legal on WUP conference line, waiting for you." She looked at her communications director, at Carol, at Ethan, who was standing near the back of the room with his jacket folded over one arm, present, but not pushing the way he always managed to be. Then she said, "Get Paul." Carol left. The room held its breath. Paul Merton walked in 2 minutes later with the particular confidence of a man who does not yet know he has been caught. He was mid-50s, sharp-suited with the easy authority of someone who had sat in important rooms for a long time and felt entitled to the chair. He looked at the faces around the table, and Ethan watched him read them, watched the moment Paul's internal calculation began shifting, the way a man's eyes change when the room stops adding up. "Maya," Paul said, steady, good. He was good. "What's going on?" Maya slid the printed summary across the table. Paul looked at it, didn't touch it. "That's a serious document to put in front of someone without context," he said. "The context is Saturday at 2:17 a.m., Maya said. "That's when you sent those files." A pause. Very brief. The pause of someone deciding which version of the next 30 seconds to inhabit. "I don't know what you're referring to," Paul said. "Paul?" Maya's voice didn't rise. It dropped, which was worse. "I've known you 11 years. You are one of the most competent people I've ever employed. Do not insult both of us by making me walk through the timestamps out loud." Something moved through Paul's face. The architecture of the denial softened at the edges. "Gerald approached me," he said finally, 6 weeks ago. The room did not react. Everyone in it had suspected. Hearing it confirmed was still different. "He told me the company was better positioned with new leadership," Paul continued. His voice had shifted, still controlled, but the performance had come down. What was left was something almost like relief, the relief of a man who has been carrying something heavy and finally set it on the floor. "He said the Reston deal would stabilize everything, that it was better for the employees. For the long term—" "Stop," Maya said. He stopped. "You sat at my table," she said. "You were in every strategy session. You knew what that acquisition meant. You knew what those files contained, and you sent them to someone who was actively working to take this company from me." She paused. "I need you to hear what I'm saying, Paul. Not the version you told yourself at 2 a.m. The actual thing." The silence in the room was the kind that has texture. Paul looked at his hands, then back at Maya, and Ethan, watching from the back of the room, saw something he recognized, the specific expression of a man who had made a decision that felt like strategy at the time, and felt right now in the fluorescent reality of a conference room, with a printed summary on the table, like something else entirely. "I thought," Paul started. "I know what you thought," Maya said. "Legal is on the line. HR will be here in 10 minutes. You'll be walked through the process." She paused one last time. "I'm sorry it came to this." Paul looked at her. Something passed between them. 11 years of professional trust. The memory of better moments. The weight of what was being permanently ended. He nodded once, and that was the last thing he said in that room. Ethan stepped out into the hallway while the legal team took over. He needed 30 seconds of air that wasn't weighted with consequence. He leaned against the wall outside and looked at the ceiling, and thought about how a person could spend 11 years building something and unmake it in one night at 2 a.m. Carol appeared beside him with a bottle of water which he accepted. "Does this happen often?" he asked her. "Betrayal," Carol considered. "More often than it should, less often than it feels like." She paused. "She'll be all right. She's harder than she looks." "I know," he said. Carol glanced at him sideways. "You're different from what I expected." He almost laughed. "Third time I've heard that today." "Then maybe people should adjust their expectations," Carol said, and went back inside. The board meeting was set for the following Thursday. 7 days. In those 7 days, Maya's legal team filed against Paul and against Reston Group simultaneously. The story broke publicly on Tuesday, not through Deborah Walsh, not through a blind item, but through Maya's own communications team in a controlled statement that named what had happened plainly and positioned Brooks Capital as the wronged party. The statement was Maya's idea. Ethan had been in the room when she wrote the first draft, sitting across from her at the conference table at 9 at night, with takeout containers between them and Carol asleep on the couch in the outer office. Maya had written 3 versions. All 3 were careful, measured, legally appropriate. Ethan had read all three. "They're all missing something," he said. She looked up. "What? You? They sound like the company's statement, not yours." She sat back. "They're supposed to sound like the company's statement." "The company didn't get betrayed," he said. "You did. By someone you trusted. And the people who work here, the ones who are scared right now, who don't know what this means for their jobs, they don't need a corporate statement. They need to hear from you." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't do vulnerable in public," she said. "You don't have to do vulnerable," he said. "You just have to do honest. Those aren't the same thing." She looked at him across the table, and he could see her working through it, the resistance, the instinct to control the narrative from behind the glass and underneath, that the recognition that he was right. She pulled the laptop toward her and started a fourth draft. It was 3 paragraphs, direct. In her own voice, the voice she used in private, not the one she wore in boardrooms. It acknowledged what had happened without minimizing it. It told her employees she was still standing, and she intended to keep standing. And it ended with one line that Ethan read and said nothing about because nothing needed to be said. And this company was built on the belief that integrity is not optional in good times and expendable in hard ones. That belief has not changed. The statement ran Wednesday morning. By noon, 4 board members who had been wavering had sent individual notes to Maya's office. 2 were supportive. 1 was neutral. 1 was Gerald, and his note was neither supportive nor hostile. It was careful, which told Maya more than either of the other options would have. Gerald was calculating new odds. Ethan was in his apartment that Wednesday evening, helping Lily with a book report on Charlotte's Web, when his phone buzzed with a text from a number he'd memorized by now. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult. You don't have to be there." He read it, read it again, set the phone on the table. Lily looked up from her paper. "Who's that?" "Maya," he said. Lily processed this. She had a child's clear-eyed understanding of the situation that had developed over 3 weeks of watching her father navigate something new and had resolved itself into a simple framework. Maya was complicated, her dad was handling it, and the car was still very clean. "Is she okay?" Lily asked. "She will be," he said. "Is she scared?" He thought about the woman who had said, "I don't do vulnerable in public," and then written the most honest thing he'd seen from her in 3 weeks. "Yeah," he said. "I think she is." Lily considered this with the gravity of someone for whom fear was a topic to be taken seriously. "You should go," she said. "When people are scared and they say you don't have to come, they usually mean they want you to come." "Why?" He looked at his daughter, at the book report in front of her, at the crayon drawing still on the refrigerator, the one with the enormous sun. He typed back, "I'll be there." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, "Thank you." Just that. No strategy in it. No management. 2 words from the real person underneath everything else. He put the phone down and helped Lily with her book report. The board meeting began at 9 a.m. on a Thursday that felt colder than the calendar said it should. Ethan was not in the meeting. He wasn't a board member, wasn't legal counsel, wasn't anyone with a formal stake in the outcome. He sat in the waiting area on the 42nd floor with Carol, who brought him coffee without being asked, and sat down across from him, and said absolutely nothing, which was exactly correct. Maya had walked into that conference room at 8:58 with her shoulders straight and her face composed and had not looked back. But at the door, she had stopped for just a second, and Ethan had been standing near the elevator, and their eyes had met across 30 feet of corporate flooring, and something passed between them that neither of them put words to. Then she went in. The door closed. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Ethan knew this because Carol watched the clock, and he watched Carol. At the 1-hour mark, Carol's posture relaxed slightly, which he took as a sign. At the 2-hour mark, she sat forward again, which he took as a different sign. At 2 hours and 17 minutes, the conference room door opened. Gerald came out first. He looked at Ethan, across the waiting area directly without pretense. And Ethan looked back at him with the same steadiness he brought to every difficult thing, not triumphant, not hostile, just present. Gerald's jaw worked for a moment. Then he said to no one in particular, "She's a better CEO than I gave her credit for." And he walked to the elevator and left. Ethan absorbed that, filed it. Maya came out 4 minutes later. Carol stood immediately. Ethan stood because Carol stood. Maya's face was different. Not relaxed, not celebratory. Something more fundamental than either. The expression of a person who has passed through something genuinely hard and come out the other side and is still learning what that means about their legs. She looked at Carol. 9-2, she said. Teresa moved 2 additional votes. Carol's breath went out of her in a long, slow exhale. Maya looked at Ethan. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She crossed the room and stopped in front of him, and for a moment, she just looked at him, at the suit he'd worn now to every hard thing in the last 3 weeks, at his hands, at the face of a man who had walked into her life in a hotel corridor, and never once asked for more than she'd told him the deal was. "It's over," she said. "The hard part," he said. She looked at him. "What's the easy part?" "Whatever comes next," he said, "if you let it be." Something shifted in her. Something structural, the way a wall shifts when the foundation underneath it finally settles. She had been built on the premise that control was safety, that management was survival, that every person in her life was either an asset or a liability, and the job was to know which. And this man, in 3 weeks of dinners and phone calls and late nights, and a corporate betrayal and a board vote, had not been either. Had just been himself consistently, without performance, without agenda. Had stood beside her without needing to stand over her. "I owe you an apology," she said. He waited. "When I came to your apartment building that first day," she said, "in the car, I looked at you and I saw—" She stopped, made herself finish it. "I saw your uniform, your truck, your neighborhood. And I made a calculation about who you were before you said a single word. And I have spent the last 3 weeks being shown exactly how wrong that calculation was." She paused. "I'm sorry, Ethan." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "I knew then." "And you helped me anyway." "Lily's idea, technically." She laughed. And it was a real laugh, surprised out of her unmanaged, the laugh of someone who hadn't done it in long enough that it came out slightly rough at the edges. Carol looked up from her desk with an expression of restrained shock, like she hadn't heard that sound in a long time. "I'd like to take you both to dinner," Maya said. "You and Lily. Not an event, not a strategy, just dinner." He looked at her, checked for the performance, didn't find it. "She'll want to pick the restaurant," he said. "That's fine." "She'll pick somewhere with a kid's menu." "Also fine." "She'll probably order the same thing she always orders and then try to eat half of mine." Maya's expression did the thing again, that involuntary softening the door opening before she could manage it. "I'll order extra," she said. He nodded. "Thursday works." "Thursday," she agreed. He picked up his jacket from the chair where Carol had draped it and said goodbye to Carol, who told him to drive safe with the warmth of someone who had decided somewhere in the last 3 weeks that she liked him. He rode the elevator down 16 floors and walked through the lobby and out into the Thursday morning air. He sat in his truck for a minute before starting it. Just sat. He thought about where he'd been 2 months ago. The parking garage on Jefferson, the busted pipe, the gas station sandwich Dave had passed across the break room table like a state secret. The apartment with the sticker on the door that wouldn't come off, and the drawing on the refrigerator, and Lily's voice asking if the people were nice. Some of them he had said. He thought about Gerald Brooks walking out of a board meeting and saying she's a better CEO than I gave her credit for. Not an apology, not a conversion. but a man recalibrating, which was sometimes the best you could ask of a person who had been wrong for a long time. He thought about Paul Merton. About 11 years and 2:17 in the morning, and one bad decision that couldn't be walked back. He didn't feel triumph about that. He felt something closer to grief, the specific sadness of watching a person make a choice that couldn't be undone and knowing they'd known better. He thought about Teresa Lang and 4 words, and the way those 4 words had landed in a quiet office between 2 people who were figuring out what they were to each other without a map or a template or a clean category to put it in. He started the truck. He had 4 hours before pickup. Dave had 3 jobs on the list. A pressure valve on the 2nd floor of an office building on High Street, a lighting panel that kept tripping its breaker in a warehouse on the south side, and a locked door mechanism in a retail space that the owner had described as making a sound like a dying bird, which Ethan had learned from experience meant the spring assembly was worn through. Ordinary work. Functional, reliable, invisible, until it wasn't. He drove. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Maya stood at the front of a company-wide meeting, every employee on every floor in person and on screen, and said 4 sentences that her communications team had not written. She said that the company had come through a serious breach of trust and that she wanted to be direct about what that had required. She said that integrity wasn't a marketing position, it was a daily decision, and she had not always made that decision well. She said that she had been shown recently by someone she had initially underestimated what it looked like to simply be who you are without apology and without performance. Then she said, "I intend to run this company that way from now on. I'm asking you to hold me to it." The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Not the polished applause of a board presentation. Actual applause, ragged and real, the kind that starts from one person deciding it's worth it, and spreading because it turns out a lot of other people were waiting for permission. Ethan wasn't in the room. He was on the south side of Columbus fixing a lighting panel that kept tripping its breaker, working in the quiet. He had always preferred the hum of functional things doing what they were made to do. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "I said it. In front of everyone." He read it. Set the phone on the work table. Finished tightening the connection, reset the breaker, tested the circuit. All lights on. Panel stable. He picked up the phone and typed back, "How'd it feel?" Her response came in 40 seconds. "Like setting something down I didn't realize I was still carrying." He read that 3 times. Then he typed, "Good," and went back to work. The dinner was a Thursday 3 weeks later at a place Lily chose because it had a kids' menu, and also because she had heard they made their own pasta, and she considered this a serious mark of quality. Maya arrived before them, which surprised Ethan. He had expected her to arrive after the way powerful people often did, making the room wait as a statement. She was at the table when they walked in, without her assistant, without her phone, face up on the table, without any of the apparatus, just Maya. Lily spotted her immediately and walked over with the zero hesitation of a child who had already decided where she stood on a person. "You came first," Lily said. "I wanted to be here when you arrived," Maya said. Lily considered this with her evaluating look. "That's good manners," she said, and sat down. Ethan sat across from Maya. She looked at him with the expression that had no management in it, the one he'd been seeing more of in the last few weeks, the one that had been there all along underneath everything else, waiting for someone to stop requiring her to hide it. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," she said. Lily was already studying the menu with forensic attention. Without looking up, she said, "Different how?" Maya looked at the 8-year-old who had asked the question like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Like I figured something out," she said. Lily looked up. "What did you figure out?" Maya looked at Ethan, then back at Lily. "That the people who are worth trusting," Maya said, "are the ones who show up the same way every time, whether there's something in it for them or not." Lily nodded, turned back to the menu. "Dad's like that," she said simply. "I know," Maya said. "It took you a while to notice," Lily said. Not accusatory, just factual. Maya laughed again, the same surprised, slightly rough laugh from the 42nd floor, and this time it came more easily. Like a muscle being used regularly for the first time in years, remembering what it was for. Ethan looked at the two of them. His daughter and this woman. The 8-year-old who had never learned to be small, and the CEO who had built herself into something enormous in order to survive being made small once. The peanut butter lunches, and the marble staircase, and the broken pipe on Jefferson, and the hotel corridor where something had started that neither of them had a name for yet, but both of them knew was real. The waiter came. Lily ordered the pasta and said she'd probably want some of whatever her dad was having too. The waiter, experienced in this, wrote it down without comment. Maya ordered the same thing as Ethan. He noticed. Didn't say anything, but he noticed. They ate and they talked, and Lily told Maya the entire plot of Charlotte's Web with the intensity of someone delivering important news, and Maya listened with her complete attention the way she did everything. And at the end, Lily said, "The spider dies, but it's actually not the saddest part. The saddest part is that Wilbur has to keep going without her." Maya was quiet for a moment. "That is the saddest part," she agreed. Lily nodded, satisfied, went back to her pasta. Ethan watched Maya's face in the moment after. Watched her absorb what an 8-year-old had just said about loss and continuity and what it means to keep going when someone essential is gone. Watched her not perform a reaction but actually have something quiet and private moving through her eyes, like light through water. She looked up and found him watching her. Didn't look away. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Just watching you be yourself." She held his gaze. Something moved between them. Not complicated, not strategic, not weighted with any of the architecture they had both been carrying since a hotel corridor on a Tuesday. Just two people at a table present, honest, without performance. "It's easier than I expected," she said quietly. "It gets easier," he said. "The more you do it." Lily looked up from her pasta, looked at both of them and said with complete authority, "You should probably just date for real." Ethan put his fork down. Maya looked at her water glass. "Lily," he started. "I'm just saying," she said. "It would be less complicated." She pointed her fork with the confidence of someone who had thought this through thoroughly. "And she already knows the rules to my card game. That's a good sign." Ethan looked at Maya. Maya looked at Ethan. And Maya Brooks, who had built a $500 million company on the principle that every variable should be controlled, every outcome anticipated, every risk accounted for, looked at this man across a table in a restaurant with homemade pasta and a kids' menu and said nothing at all. Because some things don't need to be managed. Some things just need to be allowed. Outside Columbus moved the way it always did, ordinary and continuous, full of people going to and from the things that mattered to them, the city indifferent and alive. And in a restaurant on the east side, a maintenance worker and a CEO and an 8-year-old with opinions about pasta and planets and good manners sat at a table and did the simplest thing any of them had done in a long time. They stayed, and that, not the board vote, not the public statement, not the moment on the 42nd floor when 4 words arrived from Teresa Lang, that was the thing that changed everything. Not the grand gesture, not the crisis survived or the enemy defeated or the truth told in front of 500 people. Just 3 people at a table, staying, choosing to be exactly where they were. That was how it started, and that was how it held. Because the strongest thing Ethan Carter had ever built was not a repaired circuit or a fixed pipe or a stable pressure valve. It was this, the unchanging, unperforming, unshakable fact of who he was. And it turned out that was exactly enough.